Hey everybody, it's Garrett, and I wanted to do a bit of a different video today. I wanted to go over a specific time period in literature, which is the early Romanticist period. So we'll just go ahead and get started, and I'll be writing these things down. So, Romanticism comes right after the Enlightenment period, and to kind of summarize the Enlightenment period, it was a time where there was a lot of sort of like very high flying, grandiose styles of literature. And during the Enlightenment period, you sort of get the beginnings of like philosophy speculating on the importance of the self and individuality. You get nods toward like God sweeping epics. You know, Paradise Lost comes out during the Romanticist, or sorry, not Romanticist, but the Enlightenment era. And so by the time you get to Romanticism, they've been spending a lot of time in philosophy, particularly from John Locke, discussing individualism and individuality. And also during the same time period, you have the Industrial Revolution going on. This is the early era of the Industrial Revolution for the British Empire and the British mainland. And as a result, there is a lot of changes to how people work, how people live, and what is going on in the world during this time period. And so Romanticism becomes a response to the ideas of individuality as well as the Industrial Revolution, and forces many to focus on more of the specific minute observations in nature, and as well as the contrast between being awestruck with like wonder and amazement, as well as being equally terrified of maybe changes to come. So in 1798 you get lyrical ballads, which kickstarts the Romanticist era. And lyrical ballads was published by Samuel Taylor Coleridge and William Wordsworth. So, if you're ever looking for like a primer, like a prime, very specific example of what Romanticism is, in terms of what that juxtaposition of or duality and juxtaposition entails, you're gonna find it here in lyrical ballads. It specifically begins, there's the poem "Rime in the Ancient Mariner," which was initially thought of to be like a sea shanty. Fun fact. And even in, this is the long narrative poem in the collection. Even in this one, you get that duality. You get the duality between amazement, between wonder, and terror at the same time. You get both. Here, I'm gonna move this over. You get the mix between the duality between wonder and terror at the same time. The Ancient Mariner narrates his journey, so you get that sense of individualism. He narrates the entirety of the journey for an individual to teach them wisdom, so there's more of that like specific one-on-one, person-to-person interaction. And between wonder and terror, For instance, things like instances in the scene where like the albatross is shot next to tongue around his neck, or the scene where he views water snakes and how beautiful they are, which I'm pretty sure water snakes are just ocean eels or something like that. But the idea here is that there is that duality of ideas between completely contrasting ideas coming together. So, kind of write that down. It'd be like if rainbows collided with the void. Yeah, something along those lines. So, contrasting ideas coming together. And then also during the Romanticist era, another big one would be Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So you get this one, 1818. So Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is obviously about the creation of Frankenstein's monster, and unlike in the movies, Frankenstein's monster is fairly intelligent and intellectual. He discusses the morality behind why he would have had to have been created, as well as why he goes about committing the crimes he does, which is more to get back at Frankenstein himself. And you get that in like letters and throughout the chapters. But there's again that duality between like creation and the terror that the fallout that can result from that creation. So here in Mary Shelley's you kind of get like creation and destruction, and obviously with more specifics as well. But there's also a lot of Romanticism, especially the early Romanticism period, is very much poetry based. Also during this time period in 1818, at the same time, you also get Percy Shelley's Ozymandias. Which, if you ever want a response to like the high flying, sweeping epics from John Milton, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and whatnot, you're definitely going to find it in Ozymandias, because Ozymandias centers on this idea between like, ruling versus nature, like kingship or lordship versus nature. There is that dueling idea between how significant is that lordship when every civilization gets sort of buried in sand eventually, you know. And so you also have another one that comes out, which is John Keats. When John Keats also starts publishing his own poetry, and Keats switches from being like some type of doctor or physician to just starting to write poetry. Unfortunately, he does end up passing at 25 due to tuberculosis. You'll find many of the early Romanticist poets die relatively young, but their ideas stick with like what's being presented for the Romanticism period. So John Keats writes poems like "When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be," which sort of takes that idea of individual, how important is it for us to be our individual selves, contrasting with, maybe the short-lived fame or expectations that things bring, or that the things we learn and the things we create bring. So yeah, again, you kind of get that Romanticism is going to mainly be focusing on the duality of contrasting ideas. It also focuses heavily on individual observations of nature. Let me actually write that down for you. Individual observations of nature. And it this time period kind of opens the door for what eventually comes after, at least in America, is transcendentalism, where they really explore the self, the individual, as this important individualism from a very browbeating perspective, especially with Emerson. But this is the Romanticist period in literature, and sort of the beginnings and origins of it, or at least in English literature. Might be different in other nationalities or other nations during that time period. This is for British literature, English literature. So yeah, anyways, I hope that'll do it for this, or I hope this works for this video. Hope this was informative. If you have any comments, please leave them. If not, that's okay too. Whatever anybody wants to leave. See you. I'm gonna do a thumbs up. Oh, can I do a thumbs up?